When I first saw the painting, the eyes weren't just looking at me. They blinked. Let's start. I didn't believe in haunted objects before that night. I was an art restorer, practical, logical, obsessed with details. Paintings told stories, yes, but they never spoke. That changed the moment I brought that portrait home. It started 3 months ago when the art museum I worked for received a call from an estate auction in rural Connecticut. A widow was selling her late husband's collection, oil paintings, sculptures, and a few antique frames. Among them, one piece caught our attention, an unsigned portrait of a woman, estimated to be over 100 years old. The auctioneer mentioned the previous owner refused to keep it in the house, claiming it made noises at night. I laughed when I heard that. Old wood creaks, canvas stretches, nothing supernatural about it. But when I saw it in person, I stopped laughing. The woman in the painting was breathtaking. Early 1900s attire, high collar, lace sleeves, pearl earrings. Her dark hair was neatly tied back, but her eyes, those eyes, they were wide, almost too real, painted with such precision that you could swear she was alive. The background was shadowy, indistinct, but faint outlines of an old room could be seen if you looked long enough. A fireplace, a cracked mirror, and what looked like someone standing behind her, half hidden in the dark. I bought it immediately. The museum agreed to let me restore it in my home studio before putting it on display. That was my first mistake. The first night, I placed it on my easel and began cleaning off the decades of dust. My cat, Luna, who usually sat on my desk, hissed the moment she saw the painting. Her fur stood up as she backed away into the corner, growling at the canvas as if it were alive. I scolded her, thinking she was reacting to the smell of the old varnish. But later, when I turned off the lights and went to bed, I heard a faint tapping sound, like a fingernail gently knocking against wood. Tap, tap, tap. I got up, thinking it might be a loose shutter, but when I walked into the studio, the room was still. The only light came from the street lamp outside, reflecting faintly on the woman's painted face. Her eyes seemed to follow me. I told myself it was just the angle, just my imagination. I covered the painting with a white sheet and went back to bed. The tapping stopped. The next morning, the sheet was on the floor. The painting was uncovered, leaning slightly to one side as if someone had touched it. I live alone. My studio is locked at night. There was no way it could have fallen by itself. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The woman's lips. Yesterday, they were closed. Now, they were slightly parted. I checked my restoration photos. I wasn't mistaken. They had definitely changed. I told myself I was overworked. Maybe I had cleaned off a layer of grime and revealed more detail. I convinced myself of that until I went to bed again. That night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. At first, it was so soft that I thought it was the wind, but then I realized it was coming from the studio, a woman's voice, slow, muffled, speaking words I couldn't understand. I turned on the light and walked cautiously toward the door. My heart was pounding. The whispering stopped. I opened the studio door. The painting was uncovered again, but this time there was something different. The background, the faint room that had always been blurry was sharper, clearer. The cracked mirror was now distinct, and in that mirror's reflection, there was a shape, a figure, a dark silhouette that wasn't there before. I stared for several seconds, frozen. Then I backed away and closed the door. I didn't sleep at all that night. Over the next few days, things escalated. Objects began to move around the studio. My brushes fell from the table. My cat refused to enter the room. And each morning, the painting changed, subtly, but undeniably. The woman's expression shifted, her lips curving into a faint, almost mocking smile. The background grew darker, as though the room behind her was closing in. And then, one evening, I heard crying. It was faint, sorrowful, echoing through the house, even though I was alone. I followed the sound to the studio, and there she was, the woman in the painting, tears glistening on her painted cheeks, actual moisture. I reached out to touch it, but the moment my finger brushed the surface, the lights flickered, and I felt something cold grab my wrist. I screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a stool. The touch vanished, but on my wrist, there was a mark, a small red fingerprint that wasn't mine. I called the auction house the next morning, demanding to know where the painting had come from. The man hesitated before answering. It belonged to a painter named Arthur Vale, he said. He disappeared sometime in the 1920s. His wife, Evelyn, was the model in most of his portraits. They said she died suddenly, but no one ever found her body. That night, I couldn't resist. I examined the back of the canvas more closely. There was an old layer of paint sealing the wooden frame. Out of curiosity, I scraped a small section away and froze. Underneath the canvas, faintly visible through the thin fibers, were human fingernail scratches. I dropped the tool and stumbled backward. That's when I realized what I'd been seeing in the background of the painting all along. That shadowy figure behind the woman wasn't her husband. It was her. The whispers grew louder after that. Sometimes I'd hear her crying. Other times she'd call my name. The worst part? The figure behind her, the one hidden in the darkness, started to move closer every night. By the fifth night, it stood right behind her shoulder. By the sixth, it was whispering in her ear. And by the seventh, the woman's face was pressed against the inside of the canvas, as if she were trying to escape. That's when I tried to burn it. I took it outside, doused it in lighter fluid, and set it on fire. But the flames didn't catch. The varnish melted, the paint bubbled, but the image beneath remained untouched. The woman's face seemed to twist in pain, and I heard that same scream, not from my ears, but inside my head. I collapsed, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in my bed. The painting was back on the wall, pristine, untouched. The brush marks were clean, no burn marks anywhere. The woman looked calm again, too calm. I called my friend David, another restorer, and begged him to take it away. He laughed, said I was being dramatic, and came over that afternoon. He looked at the painting and said it was one of the most beautiful portraits he'd ever seen. I warned him, begged him not to touch it. He didn't listen. That night, David took the painting home. The next morning, he was found dead in his apartment. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, but the walls were covered in tiny scratch marks from the inside. The painting was gone. 2 weeks later, I got a delivery at my door. No return address. I opened the box, and inside was the same portrait, wrapped carefully in white cloth. This time, the woman's expression had changed again. She was smiling, and she was wearing David's glasses. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell anyone. I sealed the painting in a wooden crate, nailed it shut, and buried it behind my house. That was 3 months ago. But last night, I heard that sound again. Tap, 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 coming from under the floorboards. I went to check, flashlight trembling in my hand. The tapping grew louder, faster, almost frantic. I pulled up the loose board and froze. Because right there, staring up at me from the darkness, was the woman's face. Painted, perfect, but her eyes moved. And before I could scream, a whisper slipped out of the hole, the same voice I'd heard that first night. "Don't cover me again." So if you ever come across a painting that seems too real, don't take it home. Because art doesn't just capture beauty. Sometimes it traps souls that never stopped looking for a way out. The end.